Egyptian hieroglyphs were a formal writing system used by the ancient Egyptians that combined logographic and alphabetic elements. Egyptians used cursive hieroglyphs for religious literature on papyrus and wood. Hieroglyphs are related to two other Egyptian scripts, hieratic and demotic. Early hieroglyphs date back as far as 3300 BCE, and continued to be used up until the end of the 4th century CE, when non-Christian temples were closed and the monumental use was no longer necessary. After the loss of the knowledge of hieroglyphic writing, the decipherment of hieroglyphs remained an enduring puzzle which would only be solved in the 1820s by Jean-François Champollion, with the help of the Rosetta Stone. Etymology. The word hieroglyph comes from the Greek adjective epsilon rho omicron gamma lambda epsilon phi iota kappa omicron sigma, a compound of epsilon rho omicron sigma and gamma lambda epsilon phi omega. In turn, a calque of Egyptian Medo WNTR, God's words. The glyphs themselves were called tau epsilon rho omicron gamma lambda epsilon phi iota kappa gamma rho alpha mu mu alpha tau alpha, the sacred engraved letters. The word hieroglyph has become a noun in English, standing for an individual hieroglyphic character, as used in the previous sentence. The word hieroglyphic is an adjective, but is often erroneously used as a noun in place of hieroglyph. History and evolution. Hieroglyphs emerged from the proliferate artistic traditions of Egypt. For example, symbols on Gurzian pottery from c. 4000 BCE resemble hieroglyphic writing. In 1998, a German archaeological team under Gunter Dreyer excavating at Abydos uncovered tomb Uj of a pre-dynastic ruler, and recovered 300 clay labels inscribed with proto-hieroglyphs, dating to the Naqada IIIA period of the 33rd century BCE. The first full sentence written in hieroglyphs so far discovered was found on a seal impression found in the tomb of Seth-Peribsen at Lqaab, which dates from the 2nd dynasty. In the era of the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom, about 800 hieroglyphs existed. By the Greco-Roman period, they numbered more than 5,000. Jeffrey Sampson stated that Egyptian hieroglyphs came into existence a little after Sumerian script, and, probably, were invented under the influence of the latter, and that it is probable that the general idea of expressing words of a language in writing was brought to Egypt from Sumerian Mesopotamia. However, given the lack of direct evidence, no definitive determination has been made as to the origin of hieroglyphics in ancient Egypt. Instead, it is pointed out and held that the evidence for such direct influence remains flimsy, and that a very credible argument can also be made for the independent development of writing in Egypt. Recent discoveries such as the Abydos glyphs challenge the commonly held belief that early logographs, pictographic symbols representing a specific place, object, or quantity, first evolved into more complex phonetic symbols in Mesopotamia. Hieroglyphs consist of three kinds of glyphs. Phonetic glyphs, including single consonant characters that function like an alphabet, logographs, representing morphemes, and determinatives, which narrow down the meaning of logographic or phonetic words. As writing developed and became more widespread among the Egyptian people, simplified glyph forms developed, resulting in the hieratic and demotic scripts. These variants were also more suited than hieroglyphs for use on papyrus. Hieroglyphic writing was not, however, eclipsed, but existed alongside the other forms, especially in monumental and other formal writing. The Rosetta Stone contains three parallel scripts: hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek. Hieroglyphs continued to be used under Persian rule, and after Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt. During the ensuing Ptolemaic and Roman periods, it appears that the misleading quality of comments from Greek and Roman writers about hieroglyphs came about, at least in part, as a response to the changed political situation. Some believe that hieroglyphs may have functioned as a way to distinguish true Egyptians from some of the foreign conquerors. Another reason may be the refusal to tackle a foreign culture on its own terms, which characterized Greco-Roman approaches to Egyptian culture. Generally, having learned that hieroglyphs were sacred writing, Greco-Roman authors imagined the complex but rational system as an allegorical, even magical, system transmitting secret, mystical knowledge. By the 4th century, few Egyptians were capable of reading hieroglyphs, and the myth of allegorical hieroglyphs was ascendant. Monumental use of hieroglyphs ceased after the closing of all non-Christian temples in 391 CE by the Roman Emperor Theodosius I. The last known inscription is from Philly, known as the Graffito of Esmet Takhom, from 394 CE. Decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphic writing as active knowledge of the hieroglyphs and the related scripts disappeared. Numerous attempts were made to decipher the hidden meaning of the ubiquitous inscriptions. The best-known examples from antiquity are the Hieroglyphica by Horapollo, which offers an explanation of almost 200 glyphs. Horapollo seems to have had access to some genuine knowledge about the hieroglyphs, as some words are identified correctly, although the explanations given are invariably wrong. The Hieroglyphica thus represent the start of more than a millennium of interpreting the hieroglyphs as symbolic rather than phonetic writing. In the 9th and 10th century CE, Arab historians Dulnun al-Masri and Ibn Washir offered their interpretation of the hieroglyphs. In his 1806 English translation of Ibn Washir's work, Joseph Hammer points out that Athanasius Kircher used this along with several other Arabic works in his 17th century attempts at decipherment. Kircher's interpretation of the hieroglyphs is probably the best-known early modern European attempt at decipherment, not least for the fantastic nature of his claims. Another early attempt at translation was made by Johannes Goropius Becanus in the 16th century. Like other interpretations before it, Kircher's translations were hampered by the fundamental notion that hieroglyphs recorded ideas and not the sounds of the language. As no bilingual texts were available, any such symbolic translation could be proposed without the possibility of verification. Kircher further developed the notion that the last stage of Egyptian could be related to the earlier Egyptian stages. The real breakthrough in decipherment began with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone by Napoleon's troops in 1799, as the stone presented a hieroglyphic and a demotic version of the same text in parallel with a Greek translation. Plenty of material for falsifiable studies in translation was suddenly available. In the early 19th century, scholars such as Sylvester Sacy, Johann David Blade, and Thomas Young studied the inscriptions on the stone, and were able to make some headway. Finally, Jean-François Champollion made the complete decipherment by the 1820s. In his Lettre M. Dacia, he wrote, "It is a complex system, writing figurative, symbolic, and phonetic all at once, in the same text, the same phrase, I would almost say in the same word." Hieroglyphs survive today in two forms: directly, through half a dozen demotic glyphs added to the Greek alphabet when writing Coptic, and indirectly, as the inspiration for the original alphabet that was ancestral to nearly every other alphabet ever used, including the Roman alphabet.